Hey all, so today we're going to be doing another Figma tutorial, and today we'll be prototyping and wireframing. Well, wireframing first. So I'm just going to be pulling in an image here shortly to base my wireframe off of, and you can either do this through copying and pasting, or you can drag and drop from your desktop. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now, and then I'll focus on another technique later. So I dragged and dropped from my desktop, but you can also place an image using the box tool that you can drop down the menu and press place image, and it'll go through different files on your computer. And I'm just opening the same picture that I dragged in initially, but I'm dropping in the same one now just to show you that different technique. So this is what we will be basing our wireframe off of. And you can see there's different components there, so I'm basically going to be replicating this using wireframing techniques in Figma. So I am creating a frame first, and to do that I clicked the cross hatchet box in the top left hand corner, and then I selected a MacBook One frame. I'm renaming it so that I can keep track of my screens. The picture is named screenshot, and that just comes up on the area on the left. So to replicate the wireframe that is low fidelity on the left, I am going to be creating the head bar, or the main header that they have, and I'm adding text by pressing the T in, again, the top left hand corner. And if you do this, you can just drag and drop and resize however you want. I lost it there for a second, so I'm just going to be doing that again. Sometimes that happens and you can just redo it again. It doesn't add another layer, so that's all fine. I said heading 1, but I want heading 1 to be a little larger than 12, so you can use the panel on the right to manipulate your text size, font, weight, whatever. So right now I'm just in Roboto, which is the automatic font they give you. I put heading 2 beneath it. I'm also going to change the text size for heading 2 just to be consistent. And you can manipulate it by pressing in your own numbers, or you can drag, or you can select from the menu that they have. I put heading 3 underneath, and then I'm moving it so that there's a little bit of a margin on the left hand side and on the top, just so I don't want it to be pressing against that, more legible that way. And I just copy and pasted that gray bar again to create the navigation bar that's in the paper prototype. I made that a little bit darker just to distinguish, and you can do that by pressing on the bar and then going over into where your text, you can manipulate it, press fill, press the color, and then manipulate it that way. You can select a color on the values, or you can type in your own hex code. So what I just did there was copy and pasted the text from heading 1, 2, and 3 to create the nav bar, just to label that, and then I manipulated the text here as well. I put in a whole text box here, but I think I want to make it smaller so it's easier to move around and make equal sizing between all of the different tabs. So in a nav bar, I'm going to create different tabs for here, to be precise. And in Figma, they give you little alignment numbers so that you know how far apart all of your items are, but I want all of the tabs to be across the navigation bar, so I'm going to select all of them by pressing down and holding shift while I do it, and then using that tool up there, and or just pressing 50, you can customize how far apart you want your elements. So I have them 200 pixels apart right now. I just changed it to 210. That looks pretty good and even spaced. So moving on from there, I realized that it's actually not heading 3, it's heading 2. So I'm going to change that size just to make it consistent again, and move that text box up a little just so that it's not hitting the bottom navigation bar. So next, I will be checking the low fidelity prototype again, It looks like they want an image and more headings and a footer. So I just copy and pasted the initial gray bar from the header, and I can resize it by just clicking on it and dragging on the edges. And I'm just manipulating the size they want. I think I'm going to go for like an even space because there's like an image and like even text on the other side or the right. And I just copy and pasted the box again, and you can do this by doing whatever copy and paste method you do on your own computer. In my case, I have a Mac, so I do Command C and Command V to do this. I am just like playing around with the boxing size a little bit because I want it to be nice and equal and have equal spacing between the margins and whatnot. So that's pretty easy to accomplish. You can just delete by pressing delete, or you can double click and press cut, however you like to do that. I manipulated the spacing like I did earlier by using that same kind of like bracket tool, and I just pressed 30. So here I copied the nav bar gray tool, or the gray bar rectangle, to create the footer. I'm just resizing it a little bit to make it bigger. And I am copying and pasting some text down to just type in footer there, just to let everyone know that that is indeed the footer. And you can drag it, and they give you these nice alignment lines to know that you are in the center of the element or the frame, whichever thing you want. So I just referenced the low fidelity prototype again, and what I'm going to be doing here is to place the image. So I'm going to be placing my headshot, my profile picture here, just as like a placement image. I'm going into my desktop files, doing that. So I'm opening that file, and you can place it in a rectangle, but I found that since I want the rectangle to be kind of where the text and the picture are framed in, I don't want the picture to be taking up the rectangle space. So I'm going to be kind of doing the same thing and placing the image, but not within the rectangle element, within just the larger canvas itself, so I can manipulate the image on its own without having to affect the box that I want it in eventually. So I'm resizing it, and to resize something proportionally is usually what I like to do. And you can do this by holding Shift and dragging it rectangularly, but if you want to size an image, if you want to drag top or to the right or just horizontally or vertically, it does not mess with the proportions in Figma. It just moves the image's boundaries elsewhere, so less of the image or more of the image is shown at one time. So I'm just making more of the image available, and I'm just going to decrease the box it's in, so that there's more text on the page. You can manipulate these fairly easily, and that looks a little bit better to me, and it makes a little more sense. So I'm going to go with that, and now I'm going to fill in the text that I want to be there for a placeholder. So I'm going to copy and paste the heading 1, 2, and 2 and put paragraph, but paragraph is usually smaller, so I'm going to manipulate the font size a little bit. And also that's a huge text box, so I'm going to be manipulating that so it's within the frame that I want, or within the rectangle space that I want. And I want everyone to know that that's like a rectangle in itself, so I can apply the stroke. But if you just apply it to text, the stroke will outline the text itself, so you need to actually get an alternate rectangle around the text itself. So now you have two elements, a rectangle and a text box. Initially the rectangle will come opaque, but you can manipulate the fill by pressing on the rectangle either in the sidebar or on the page itself. You need to pull it under the text, and you can just drag and drop it to be under the text, or you can press like move under, double click, and then press move below. And so I just deleted the fill from that, and you can do that by manipulating the color, and you can make the opacity 0 or 0% fill, and then that should make it available so that there's no color inside and you can see the text. And if you press stroke, it should be a stroke 1, and you should be able to see a box around the text. I know it's very complicated. That's way more complicated than it should be. But if you figure out another way to do that, feel free to go with that, because I'm discovering new things about Figma every day. So here I just copy and pasted both the rectangle and the text box. That's very important. Just so that you're not copying one thing, you're copying both. I just resized the rectangle, not the text box itself, because I'm going to be putting in a different kind of text. I'm going to be putting in the header. You can see the blue line kind of cuts off before the text box. So you can change that if you want to, and I just did that here so it lines up with the rectangle I already made. So here we're going to have heading 3. I changed the font size a little bit so that it's larger than paragraph but smaller than heading 2, making paragraph a little smaller so that those text font sizes align. And I'm just manipulating the heading text box here, just so that it aligns a little more. I again copy and pasted both the text and the rectangle because there's another text element below, and that will be heading 4, and again I'm making that a little bit smaller than heading 3 but larger than paragraph. Under that, I'm going to be adding another text element, and again copying and pasting both the text element and the rectangle, and I'm going to move it over. Drag and move it over, and I'm gonna make that a little larger. That's gonna be paragraph again, so I'm not gonna need to manipulate that text box at all, really. I'm just making the rectangle larger because that's how it was in the paper prototype, and I want to copy that as much as I can. And then I'm going to have heading 4 beneath that paragraph element. So again, I'm just copying and pasting, and if you drag it down and like flips upside down, no big deal. You can always undo. On Mac, that's Command Z. And I'm just making it so that the rectangle is aligned on the right side. And then beneath that, I'm going to put another paragraph, and you might be able to tell that I am perfectly aligning them 15 pixels apart. Figma has a nice tool where they allow you to see that. So it looks like I've added all the text elements that are in the that paper prototype. So I will be moving on to the second paper prototype screen, which looks like it's labeled employment.html, but I'll rename the frames a little bit later. So it looks like we have a heading 3 and OI. So what I'm going to be doing is copying and pasting the whole frame. And to do that, you want to click on the prototype screen 1, like the name of the frame itself, and copy and paste it. I didn't really like how I did that, so I can copy as there's different ways you can copy on Figma. So if you double click and do it as an SVG, it will not allow you to manipulate the text itself. You can basically do everything, but it treats each text and like element, basically each visual element, as like an image. So you can't really, like if I'm going to try to change header 3, but I'm going to click on it and it's not really going to work, but we'll see how that happens in one moment. And I'm gonna start over in a second because I did not really realize this at the beginning. So I deleted the picture element because that's not in the second paper prototype. So I'm gonna increase the header text elements box on the right, and you can see it's kind of distorting the text. And that's what I talked about earlier. It's not treating it as text itself, it's treating it as an image. So if I try to manipulate the image or the text itself, you can see there's a bunch of dots around it, and that means it's a pen tool or image itself, and you can manipulate the lines, but you can't change the text. Yes, that's a little complicated, but I realized that that was the problem, and I am going to try to copy it a different way. So I'm going to try to copy it as a CSS, but I realized that that is just simply text. So that won't work either. And I tried to copy it again as copy as properties, and I try to figure out how to paste for a second, but I don't think that really worked either. It really should be easier to copy and paste using the tools they have in Figma, but I was able to go in the toolbar that I have in the application itself and use copy using the whole frame and then paste using the whole frame, and that worked perfectly. So I named that as prototype screen 2, and again I'm just going to try to doing what I did earlier and delete the image element and then increasing the text on the right, because that's what this prototype screen is going to be mainly consisted of. So I'm just going to change the text so that it's aligned with what I see on the paper prototype, and that header 3 is going to stay the same. So I'm going to delete header 4, and I'm going to move the paragraph up just because that element is larger in the paper prototype, and I'm going to change the text here in a moment. But I'm going to use those alignment tools to make sure they're 15 pixels apart, and I'm going to put OI in that box and make it a little larger to match up with the paper prototype. And yes, I'm going to manipulate with the text tool and then make it so that I can move header 4 up, but I needed to lock the gray box because it wouldn't move without moving the text elements. So I just copy and pasted header 3 and OI because that repeats, and you know what, might as well just copy and paste what we've already done. And I changed the OI square to make it fit the gray box I had. So I just moved the prototype 2 screen under the prototype 1 screen, and I actually realized that they are called something. So I'm renaming prototype screen 1 index.html and the second one employment.html, just to make a little bit more sense with what is on the paper prototype screen and to make sure those match. So we're actually done with our wireframes, and yeah, that's very exciting. It's pretty easy to make wireframes that are really functional but low fidelity. This will get your point across, and even adding the prototype will make your design seem very high fidelity. And to do that, you want to move from the design to the prototype functionality of the application. And you can see that I clicked on the tab text element, and I want to move that to the employment.html screen. It doesn't really matter where you move the arrow to, but you just want to make sure that the screens touch one another. So it'll bring up another box that you can customize how you want your user to interact with. So if you want to do your prototyping that way, you can also navigate to pages from there as well if you don't want to drag the arrow. So I like doing push for the animation. It just makes it so that it looks more like a real website. And then you can change what direction you want to put it in. I put the other way because if you're going back to the home screen, I find that it's like more, it makes more sense to move the screen back, and if you're going to the employment screen, you're going to want to move it forward. You'll see what I mean here in a second, but that's basically the fundamental points of prototyping. So I'll just show you what I mean here. So if I click the element that I prototyped, tab, and then it'll move forward to the employment screen, but if I click footer, which I moved back to the home screen, it'll move back. So what if I wanted to change or delete a connection? That's not too hard. I can just, I'm looking at the devices here for a second because you can manipulate which device you want, but they don't have a desktop. So if you want to delete a connection, you can, or yes, if you want to delete a connection, you can simply just drag up the arrow and it'll delete it. It's really simple. And so if you wanted to create another connection from another element, just simple, easy. It might save your settings, so if you press play prototype again, it'll go to the third tab and move over to the next page. Yeah, and then if you press footer, it'll go back. So that shouldn't change your functionality too much, and they might have like blue hotspots to tell your users where to click. But what if you want another connection so that both tabs go to the employment page? Well, you can just put the original tab, drag that arrow back over, and press the play button in the share corner, and then both of the tab buttons should go to the employment page. So press footer, go back, press tab, it should go to the same place. So that makes prototyping very easy in Figma, and it makes so that your designs are cohesive and well understood by your users. And that is fundamentally what it means to design a wireframe and prototype in Figma. Good luck on your projects!